there are tens of thousands of people who know how to professionally kill using drones.
A stark warning from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the UN General Assembly this week. He called on the international community to act against Russia now, asserting that President Vladimir Putin wants to expand his war in Europe and may start by using drones. At the same time, more drones flew over European airports this week, the latest unexplained activity raising concerns about security in Northern Europe amid growing Russian aggression. And in the U.S., a highly unusual military meeting is scheduled to take place next week. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has called hundreds of U.S. generals and admirals from all around the world to Quantico. Why? We are not sure. Joining us live tonight to discuss is NBC News military analyst, retired four-star Army General Barry McCaffrey. General, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Joyce.
So let's talk about this warning from Zelensky, who told the General Assembly that the world is in, quote, the most destructive arms race in human history. Do you agree with that? What's your assessment?
Well, I think there's a lot of aspects of this. There's new forms of warfare, both electronic warfare, crypto invasion of, civilian banking systems, little green men, special operations forces with no identification, as well as this massive use now for both reconnaissance and lethal activity of drones. So it's a different world. It's been a bloody experience for both the Ukrainians and the Russians, like probably 1 million killed and wounded in the course of the war. The U.S. is taking this into account and watching it very closely and trying to understand and respond to these new technological developments.
How do you think world powers, including the United States, should be responding to what appears to be an increased threat all around the world, especially with these drones?
Well, of course, the big question are nuclear weapons. And we're seeing sort of unconstrained attention now to building up nuclear portfolios. And the Chinese in particular had only 300 nuclear weapons. They're headed to a couple of thousand. Pakistan, India, North Korea, potentially Iran in a very short period of time. So that's the number one concern. We need international dialogue on nuclear weapons. But in addition, obviously, we've got conventional war threats, in particular in the Middle East, in Gaza, the Iranians orchestrating violence throughout the region, and certainly the Russians in Europe. So it's an unsafe and unstable global community.
Meantime, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is calling hundreds of generals and admirals to Quantico. What is going on there? What's happening?
Well, we don't know. It's a very unusual thing. It's never happened in history. He's called in the commanding officer, flag rank, 1 star or above, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and their senior enlisted advisor. They're all going to Quantico. They'll be there on Tuesday. We don't know what will be done. The current speculation is, first of all, that the President of the United States didn't know about it. He looked to me like he did not understand what was happening.
That's unnerving. I'm wondering, General, is there a way we can connect all of these dots? When you look at what's going on with warfare in Europe and the drones that seem to be unexplained, the admirals and generals, military leaders all being called to Quantico, some people might be trying to connect the dots here for something larger that we don't know yet.
We have a bizarre government in power. And when it comes to the U.S. Armed Forces, over 2 million men and women, 3 million counting the civilian workforce, they respond completely to 2 civilians in terms of orders. That's the President of the United States in his role as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and the Secretary of Defense. So unless they are patently illegal orders, these 2 civilians are totally in charge, and they will be responded to by the U.S. Armed Forces. I think the Secretary of Defense seems to be way over his head, and the President has been erratic at his most generous in his thinking and policy choices.
I remember early on when Hegseth was just a candidate, just sort of a name in the hat for Defense Secretary, and we talked about it. You thought, based on his background, his qualifications, his education, that he might be an okay choice. What do you think now, looking at how he's performed so far?
I was surprised. Look, you don't get into Princeton by being stupid. So he's a sharp young guy, I'm sure. He's in the National Guard, which commands respect. 430,000 members of the National Guard. He was in combat, has a combat infantry badge. So I expected, and the fact he was dealing with defense issues on Fox TV means he was read into the evolving issues. But he's done very poorly. There's a lot of anger, a lot of insecurity, a lot of firing of people on short notice, just erratic behavior. So it's worthy of concern by the American citizens.
And something, of course, I know you're watching closely, and we're going to keep watching closely, and we'll have many more discussions about. General Barry McCaffrey, we're out of time. We are so grateful for your insight into all of this. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Good idea.